Hey everyone, this week on Great Chat, Mac makes a compelling case to bring manufacturing back home. A quick reminder, each week we answer your questions. Don't forget to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. I am Ashley and we have the whole crew here this week, Sally, Angela, Helen, and Matt.
Hi everyone. I was saying, does anyone know what the deal with Deel is? You like the pun I made? No reactions from anyone? Oh my gosh, it's too early in the morning.
Hey, I laughed. I thought it was a cute dad joke.
It was great,
You're
Angela.
adorable. I love it.
It seems really interesting to contrast, I guess, investor support around Deel to like 11x and others like fudging their maybe revenue numbers, where we saw like a flurry of investors sort of like rush to support. This one, maybe it's more of like a let's wait and see and get more information. But no, I don't think there's been any new developments.
No one has tried yet to make the case that corporate espionage is founder mode.
We found the boundary.
There's a line, guys.
There's a line.
I don't know. It feels pretty arena to me. Nothing says gladiator quite like going and hiding in a bathroom and refusing to hand over your cell phone like you have a crippling TikTok addiction.
And it is interesting because I think if you look at the two cap tables, like A16Z is on Deel's cap table, and they are notorious for being, supportive of their founders in any situation. It was one of the founding principles of the firm. And I think they've been pretty quiet here.
Like, you're not like, oh, I actively support criminal activity. Like, at a certain point, like, where does founder friendliness end?
Totally. I mean, they're also not condemning, right? Like, no one's pulling a Bill Gurley with Uber move this time around. I think they're just letting the case play out.
Well, Ripple's also taking advantage of the opportunity, and it sounds like they might be considering raising again. So we'll see how that goes. And I saw that Mamoon from Kleiner had, sent out a tweet of support. Sequoia Founders Fund are investors in those.
Corporate espionage is not founder mode, but honeypots are founder mode. So that is the takeaway. That is the takeaway from this. The way Parker navigated the situation was actually like pretty brilliant. But I think generally like the best friend to Deel is probably like the tariffs and all the crazy ripple effects around that. I mean, like
I heard you said rippling effects, and I was like, wrong joke number 2.
What's the deal with Deel? Rippling effects. We've got the puns down, guys.
A thread we've been talking about in the last few episodes has been about the IPO market coming back, and with the tariffs.
Fintech is not back, baby.
No.
Helen has retracted her statement.
Yeah, exactly.
So sad. I mean, I'm not remotely surprised, and it's not necessarily that these businesses are, directly impacted by the tariffs in terms of their core business, but in general, you do not want to go public when the markets are shifting so dramatically. That is like one of the sort of like big rules. You want some predictability around it. And so, it's not, as someone who has done an IPO that was paused for 10 months, I can say like, it's not hard to pause, right? You just like postpone your roadshow. And so hopefully if like there's some sort of stability reached in the next weeks or months, these companies are ready to go. So
actually remind me why Box paused their IPO. I can't remember the timeline.
Yeah, we can turn this into a therapy session. So Box filed to go public in March of 2014, and our S1 drop coincided with like a pretty brutal market correction for super high growth SaaS stocks. So like SaaS companies really spend into growth, right? Like you spend a lot to acquire a customer, but because it's recurring revenue and oftentimes expansion, it makes sense, but there are like high losses before those show up in terms of revenue. And so the entire market for like SaaS stocks dropped like, I want to say like 30 to 40%. It was brutal. It was a bad time to be on file. And it actually felt a lot like this moment because there hadn't been a lot of IPOs leading up to that.
I read a crazy stat, I haven't verified it, from Apollo's chief economist that said 86% of companies that make more than 100 million of revenue are actually private companies, which kind of just goes back to the point we've been talking about on the pod for a while, which is there is this huge backlog of companies that need to find liquidity that haven't in this market. And with the tariff situation, it's unclear when those companies are going to move into the public sphere.
Angela, I'm so curious, like what you're thinking about the tariffs from your position.
I saw a meme on Instagram when the whole AI craze took off. It was like, cheetah, fastest animal on the planet, like airplane, like fastest travel around the world. And then it was like investors, fastest people to get up to speed on AI. And now I feel like we should create a fourth box for tariffs, because I feel like everyone that was an expert in AI has now become an expert in macroeconomic policy and is like mansplaining what's happening with tariffs and what should be happening. And it's just, it's really entertaining.
Well, don't forget when we were all experts on like pandemics and viruses a few years ago. So our range is boundless.
It's
we
true.
also had the brief moment of all being experts about ocean submersibles. We really do. Also, global trade. Remember when we had the canal blocked? We've had a number of things. We even had, the fight in outside Uniqlo over the weekend.
It's really shocking how there is so much time to become experts in all these subjects when everyone is just so busy.
Well, maybe we will ground ourselves in facts and not quite extrapolate, but some interesting stats I saw related to tariffs. Everyone's thinking about how this is impacting companies in the US. So on the grocery side, I saw a stat that said 50% of non-food products sold at Target come from international manufacturers, which was actually quite surprising to me. And then on the furniture side, IKEA, everyone's favorite college and post-college furnishing supply, they source about 90% of their goods outside of the US. And they actually tried to open a US manufacturing plant in Virginia, but shut it down in 2019 due to high costs. So I thought these stats were interesting as we think about the impact of tariffs on the cost of items to consumers in the US, and then all this dialogue that's come concurrent with tariffs about the need to onshore manufacturing in the US.
I mean, that perfectly tees up our big topic for this week, and also frees us from being experts on tariffs. So thank goodness. We don't have the tariff expertise, but we do actually have a manufacturing expert on our pod, Mac. So we're going to try something a little bit different this week and put Mac in the hot seat and have her pitch us on why bringing manufacturing back to the US is a good thing. And actually, what does it even mean to bring manufacturing back to the US? I think for me, that term feels so nostalgic and feels like going backwards. But Mac, I think you live in like a very different version of that. Maybe just to start, because you made the switch, you were previously at Palantir and then Brex, and then you did a venture stint. And then last year you joined a manufacturing tech company. So like, did you know the tariffs were coming? Like why the career change?
Okay, so no, I did not know the tariffs were coming specifically in this incarnation. I had a feeling that I think the thing that tipped me off that we were going to start caring more about manufacturing. There's a whole variety of factors that made me think, and we'll chat through it, but there's a huge variety of factors that make me like really excited about the prospect of doing more manufacturing in the US. I like disclaimers up front. I'm not necessarily like a defender or someone who's like deeply excited about the current administration's implementation of policy, but I do think that something that's been really frustrating in the dialogue has been all the doomerism around manufacturing and around doing like any type of manufacturing in the United States, when like we have both a long history and very recent examples of like extraordinary manufacturing success that's like actually really exciting and like really like apolitical and like deeply aligned with a lot of people's goals for the United States of like creating really like high impact jobs that bring people a lot of meaning, limiting massive wealth disparities, allowing people access to like really exciting and interesting work. And I am aiding entrepreneurship. So I think like I'm really excited to chat about manufacturing in the United States. Yeah.
Well, Matt, ground us in like what we should be thinking about and also just be thinking more expansively when we think about manufacturing. Because I think right now, like our brains go to like two polar opposites. One, when we think of US manufacturing, we think of more like a small business, like artisan craft, creator who sells their homemade goods on Etsy. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we think of like this, very global sort of like big factory manufacturing. And we keep trying to like insert that image into the United States. And I think that people are having a disconnect. So like, give us sort of like, what are the, I guess maybe the sectors or even the types of products that you're most excited about when you think about like manufacturing in the United States?
So that's a great question. When I think about what we're best positioned to address right now, and this is where I start to speak a little bit outside of my expertise. Like I know what like I'm working on. Oh, I should probably get that context. I like,
Yeah, what does Adrian do? Please
What do
tell
you
us.
do, Matt, when you're
who
not
are you? What are you doing? What do you know about manufacturing? So like Ashley said, I come from a tech background. So like did the like Google internship, did like all of the worked at a startup, worked in venture, worked at a like big company. I really do have kind of like a textbook tech background. It's been amazing. I've been so lucky. I have learned so much. I've worked with so many incredible people. It's been amazing. And like Hadrian's also a tech company. So there's that. So I work at a company that does advanced manufacturing. That means we make components and parts for things like spaceships, things like semiconductors, things like defense, like a bunch of defense applications. We're not really touching like weapons. That has a whole other, there's all sorts of chemical things you need to worry about there that like we're not doing. But anyway, there I run a division of the company that helps bring together smaller manufacturers with a bunch of startups and even larger companies who need to get parts manufactured. Because one of the things that's really hard in our corner of American manufacturing is that it's an incredibly fractured network. So you have all of this talent and all of these amazing shops and like that grow anywhere from like 2 employees all the way to 200. But there's not really like some easy way to traverse this network. And so I run a section of the business that is focused entirely on getting great manufacturers, really great business. So I've in the last year, I've had a lot of experience getting to know like boots on the ground, like folks who are actually building. And it's been really exciting and really fun. And I've learned a lot from a lot of really amazing, interesting people. Our cultural consciousness around manufacturing is really centered in like the early 1900s when like we started to make big inroads on manufacturing and like when it was a big part of the like national dialogue and national identity. And I think that like while that was a huge step for us and definitely had all sorts of negative consequences as well, we didn't have great regulation or understanding or controls around things like pollution, et cetera. I think we've learned a lot since then. And the factory model looks really different now. When you go into a factory, like a more modern factory, what you're going to find is that there's a huge amount of automation, but it's also not some like robot utopia. There's still people all over the place, but it's not necessarily like this vision of like a sweatshop. And it's also not this vision of just like robots everywhere. I think we're probably decades away from that being able to be a reality in any industry, let alone some of these deeper industries.
I'm from Buffalo, New York, and like there was a huge a manufacturing plant that I think they repurposed for some of the batteries for Tesla. And it was like the greatest thing that had happened to the city. Like you would think that the Bills won the Super Bowl. Like it was, people are really excited about those jobs coming back. And so I think that from here, we don't really I don't think we have a finger on the pulse sitting in our seats or on Twitter on like exactly how I think most Americans feel about some of like the conversation around like bringing manufacturing back. So just curious, how we would do it. Will we do it like by reviving old factories, or would we build net new? And I think that building net new, then you start getting into like, does that come from like the government, and like do infrastructure bills have to be involved with that, right?
right versus all of the like venture capital investment that's now
Right.
flooding into this space. Like based on my Twitter feed, it feels like actually it's like tech that's going to bring manufacturing back and startups and venture capitalists and American dynamism theses. And so, Mac, I'm so curious, like, what is the role that you see tech playing in this like revitalization of manufacturing, and like what are the other stakeholders? What are the other things that need to be in place?
Yeah, so I think that there's definitely a piece like tech alone probably can't save manufacturing, but I imagine it plays a pretty big role. because a lot of what we need to do manufacturing in a very like American way is going to be implementing a huge amount of both um, process and tech changes. Like one of the things that's like most transformative across a number of factories that I've visited, and a number of like what we call job shops that I've visited, is a really good tech implementation. So having some way of understanding when a piece moves from point A to point B, because like you have traceability requirements across the factory. There's going to be a piece of that that's software. There's going to be additional like hardware and robotics needs, because we're going to need to do a bunch of robotics. We don't have like some massive population that we're ready to deploy against manufacturing. Our manufacturing in like the 21st century isn't going to be like 95% people. It's going to be like humans enabled by a lot of robotics, a lot of process, a lot of automation. And that is like where I think tech is going to have the most help. Both in terms of like building some of the machines that can do a lot of that can sort of extend the abilities of humans, as well as the software that like actually like runs the factory and helps make things go faster and helps make things run optimally. I think there's also this piece that's like kind of basic, which is like it's really, really hard to run a business. And there probably need to be more like tech solutions around like how do you do like taxes, how do you do compliance, how do you do like all of the basic like unsexy stuff that go into running any type of like any category of business. But manufacturing, again, depending on which sector you're in, has like a ton of compliance overhead and has like a ton of issues there. So I think like there's a ton of opportunities to for tech people, and there's a lot of reasons to be excited if you are in the VC world, to be excited about opportunities in manufacturing, in domestic manufacturing.
Mac, I feel like you just accidentally said something positive about AI, because it's going to be AI doing a tax.
I know. I was thinking about AI too when she was talking. I was like, well, who's going to build these factories? And it's like AI and robots will build these factories. Like, oh, it'll take forever.
No, AI and robots are not going to build. AI is not going to build factories. Okay. AI is going to be really useful in doing bookkeeping and doing customer management. AI is going to be really useful in like marketing and outreach in like in a platform play. AI is like not necessarily going to be like, AI probably can even like relatively quickly do some basic tasks like folding. Like AI is like a useful and meaningful and awesome thing. The reason why I was like ranting about being bored about it was because the only AI announcements that I keep reading about are either we came up with a new model or we raised a bunch of money. And like those are both interesting and cool and amazing accomplishments. They're just like not as interesting as like the impact that we have on society, the impact that we have on business, you know what I mean? I like AI.
I do think that AI is going to impact the way that we build.
The models are enabling a lot of these automation and robotics to be a lot more sophisticated than where it is today. So like there is a reason to be optimistic about these models. I think it goes back to like our question around like how much of it is like surface level enthusiasm about AI and what actually is the implications of like how AI could be impacted on the factory floor.
I think what we come back to, like in what Max said and Helen's questions and your question, Sally, is it's not a single piece or a single player. This is a whole ecosystem that will take time to develop. One thing you're seeing in this gold rush around data centers is that there is a shortage of electricians. There's literally like not enough people to go into data centers to wire them. And that is not something you can snap your fingers and change. That is a systemic issue where we need to have more training of a certain vocation. And the same probably exists to a larger degree in manufacturing, because there's so many other skills that are needed that we just haven't focused on. And that takes years of education planning and practice to develop. There's the other question that you're seeing in data centers of supply chain. So you want to build a data center. Well, the supply chain is backed up until 2026. So there's literally no way for you to get the materials to build the data center you need until then. And when we think about onshoring, it's probably the same thing of investing in your supply chain and developing these capabilities. And what is the like cost of power? How do you get power to your facilities? How do you get in line to actually get into the transmission game? And so all of these questions are not like is manufacturing onshore good or bad? It's, do we want to invest in developing this? And how do companies think about it beyond a 4-year presidential cycle? And that's where tech could probably play a big role, because our time horizon is longer than 4 years. It's really difficult for companies to make these types of capital decisions.
I think one thing I really appreciate about the manufacturing conversation, though, is that like it does pause what I think was an inevitable sort of path to everything being, you know, coding, everything being like at your fingertips, but like actually happening in the physical world so far away. And I think that, you know, when you put all the supply chain and manufacturing overseas, which is like the trend that we were going towards, right? Until we had just had this paused moment where it's like, you know, do we have an opportunity to bring this, you know, to pieces of it to back to the United States? I think that like when you think about the next generation, right? Like maybe the millennials today, they did not have that as part of the conversation. They were just young enough to be, you know, born after that and all these jobs being high tech. And then, you know, like if we kept going down that path and everybody was going to, you know, learn how to code, and it's just we're farther and farther away from the creation of things that isn't software. And so what I appreciate about this is just that we're actually like just looking backwards or just pausing for a second and seeing like, you know, are we headed towards the right direction? What happens if we continue down this path?
I think one thing, by the way, that the administration hasn't been doing well, where it's Ashley and Helen's expertise, is communicating the strategy. So, like, we talked about all this, like, innovation and robotics and automation and warehouses. I think there was Howard Lutnick did an interview where he talked about how every job, you know, every factory is going to look like this, like, you know, Amazon warehouses with incredible tech and robotics. And then the next interview, he took it all back and he was like, no, 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 we're not taking any jobs back. And, you know, like how Peter Navarro has talked about this whole like plan of tariffs and why we're doing it is so inconsistent that I think it brings a lot more chaos to the strategy.
They're kind of letting every segment create their, like, you know, if you want to go back to the old days and the manufacturing jobs are all human labor, you can have that version. And if you are in Silicon Valley, it's all going to be robotics and automation and AI. And maybe there is no cohesive narrative because there's no cohesive plan, slash they want everyone to sort of like latch on to their version of this that sort of serves their needs.
Because everybody just goes in sound bites. So yeah, you service that one sound bite to the venture community. You service this other one to, you know, rally that's happening in other parts of the country.
It's been a little frustrating to have the manufacturing in the US conversation tied so tightly to politics, because I think like if as soon as something becomes a political talking point, a lot of the nuance gets removed. And that's a frustrating thing when you believe so deeply that like something could be really wonderful and really great. But I think like something that's not coming up in the political discussion is, do we believe that the status quo is working? Like if you were to think about like, and I don't necessarily have like, I mean, I clearly have an opinion, but I think like it's something that like I'd love our listeners to think about, which is like, okay, if you extrapolate out our existing economy and our current trajectories out 10, 50, 100 years, do you like the picture that that paints? Like, does the way that we are moving as a society, is that exciting to you? Do we think that that works? And is this the future that we want to fight for? Do we think that this fits into the new global paradigm? And I think like that's an interesting question.
You just kind of keep continuing on this line, right, in the direction that we are headed, where everybody has a white collar job, and you know, like depression is increasing, and it just seems like young people today feel less and less excited about like their prospects ahead. I mean, there you know, maybe needed to be some sort of correction. Is looking in the mirror and, you know, the possibility of having manufacturing a bigger part of like, you know, our potential future, like the thing? I don't know, but it's interesting. And I think it's worth considering.
It's time to send the children to the mines. Okay.
Tariffs will continue until morale improves.
I don't know if my children are ready for the mines. If that's the future, they're not cut out for this world. They're cut out for receiving Amazon packages.
I don't know, with all the eggs that they're eating.
I know the pod listeners are eagerly awaiting an egg update. As I texted the group chat last week, we panicked and bought 15 dozen eggs because we weren't sure what was going to happen to egg prices. So sorry if we caused a mini egg shortage in San Francisco. But on that note, we should head to our rapid fire. So this Q&A is brought to you by Mercury, the fintech used by over 200,000 startups to simplify their finances. So the question we have this week: I am graduating from business school and interned at 2 venture jobs. I haven't landed anything yet, and it's 2 months until graduation. Any advice?
Oh man, I mean, don't take it personally is my number one piece of advice. It was already a weird stretch in venture. And I think the delayed IPOs we talked about earlier in this are going to make it even weirder for a while, right? Like there's been no liquidity, which means LPs are deploying more slowly, which means VC firms are deploying more slowly and might be hiring less quickly. And so the biggest thing to know is it's probably not you. I haven't met you, but it's probably not you. I will also just say, as someone who graduated not from business school, but from college right before a recession, like, you know, it's it's okay to be scrappy. And I always think like careers are more a process of like discovery than going from point A to point B. And so, if that venture job doesn't transpire, but you find a cool startup job or something else, like it might be the best thing you've ever done. And so, not being too attached to any particular outcome right now, but being really open and curious is probably the only way to get through this really chaotic era that we're in. And so, good luck to you. But yeah, be open to different possibilities. And I'm sure that's a harder thing to do after investing and going to business school and having this career path in mind. But these are weird times, but careers are long. So good luck.
Yeah, I think getting an operating job right now is such an exciting time. It's like you look at like our group, like Helen, you worked at the early days of Facebook. Ashley, you were early days of Box. Mac, you're at like early days of Palantir, and you have all these like mafias from these like Xbox, X Facebook, X Palantir. And right now we have like so many really exciting companies like the OpenAIs, the Anthropics, and fast growth and like very like concentrated like high talent. And
And I'd
so
also say that whatever, I don't know what business school this person is going to, but like most likely you have a mafia of your own. And I think that that will become, more and more valuable as the years go on. And so, maybe it's hard to see right now, but so much of what you do pay for in business school is really like the friendships, the experience, of course, but it's that network.
I always buy my friendships. I think that's
Yeah. And not to bring it back to the pod, but if you're looking for an investing role and not an operating role, you could always start off with SPVs. They're not just for chumps, they're for people who are trying to build a track record as well. So you don't need to work at a fund. You can go out there and hustle and start your track record by raising SPVs for companies as well.
I think that's a great way to end.
all right. See everyone next week.
See you next week.
Thanks for joining us on Great Chat. Have questions for us? Make sure to submit them at anothergreatchat.com. See you next week.